Hello again, thanks for joining me today and another video. Today I'm going to talk about hills, how to ride hills in endurance cycling events, and what pace you should use. You'll see that on the screen I've got this chart with 3 training zones, and you can use your training zones to get an idea of what's a sensible pace to ride at. You may or may not know that in timed events, it's better to ride a little bit harder on the uphills than it is on the downhills, because it's more efficient because of the wind resistance. Because when you're going slower, there's less wind resistance, and the penalty in wind resistance is what's known as non-linear. So if you go twice as fast, it's more than twice as hard to go. You need more than twice the power to go twice as fast on a flat road. So when you're going slower, you get more benefit from bang for your buck, so to speak. So riding hills a bit harder, recovering a bit on the flat, and definitely recovering on downhills is the way to go. And downhills sometimes feel, when you're going downhill, it seems like it's great, and there's a real temptation to pedal harder, and because you're going fast. But in fact, you're not really making a lot of gain from pedaling harder. You may as well freewheel, actually, and particularly if you're in an ultra endurance event where energy saving is key to the success, then just freewheeling downhill is the main thing to do. And the other point to make here is that if you're choosing your gearing for the event, if you can't pedal on steep downhills or even sort of relatively medium downhills, it doesn't matter. So if you're spinning out on the downhills, don't worry too much about it. Choose your gearing to be able to ride at a good cadence on the climbs. So looking at zones here, there are two main points, 2 main physiological markers that people use in setting up training zones, and also in what energy systems your body uses to when you're riding. So this chart is based on heart rate. You can see along the bottom percentages. I'll put the chart on the screen in bigger on the video so that you can look at it and see the numbers. So you can see that as you ride harder, as you go along the right hand side of the chart, your heart rate goes up. So the right hand point here is 100% of your maximum heart rate. This point here, which is known as your second ventilatory threshold, or whatever, it's round about what your FTP is. People use, and it's a well-known term now, FTP, or your critical power, or your anaerobic threshold. And that's here, I've taken this off one of Stephen Seiler's talks, and so I'll give him credit for that and hope he doesn't mind me using it, is about 87% or 90% of your maximum heart rate. And then this ventilatory threshold 1, which is probably the most important one, your aerobic threshold, for endurance cycling events, for long events, is around about 80% of your maximum heart rate. So if you were to use a 5-zone model, a good model I like to use is the Andy Coggins model. This VT1, your aerobic threshold, probably comes around about the top of your zone 2, your training zone 2, and you confusingly perhaps the anaerobic threshold, or FTP, in the middle of the Andy Coggins zone 4. Okay, so that's that. So they're the training zones, and you use up your energy faster the faster you go, which is not really surprising. So in this area here, you're using what's known as your anaerobic capacity, which is sometimes called W prime, and in things like WKO, the analytical tool that goes with Training Peaks, it's known as FRC, functional reserve capacity, because they like to use functional measures, testing of power, to estimate these values. So if you're in that zone, you're using up your anaerobic capacity. That's limited. You can maybe, so if you went as hard as you possibly could for 5 minutes, you'd use all your anaerobic capacity, and you'd reach what's known as your VO2 max. So you don't want to be doing that in a long endurance, an ultra endurance event, or even you don't really want to be doing it if you're riding a sporty for a one-day event that might be maybe 100 kilometers, because you'll use that energy up. The good thing is though that you can recover it quite quickly. So if you go below your FTP, your anaerobic threshold, you start to recover this anaerobic capacity, and then you'll have it available to use again. So I mean, it's quite a quick to recover. If you rest completely, you might be able to recover it all in maybe 10 minutes or 5 minutes, or even less, depending on how well trained you are. But going flat out for 5 minutes is not going to make a big difference to your time over a 2-week event, like the Transcontinental race. This zone here, this yellow zone here, is probably a good thing to see as a bit of a warning zone. So if you train above your aerobic threshold, the first turning point, you start to use what's muscle glycogen, which is the energy stored in your muscles, and also there's a lot stored in your liver. And you use this. You can use this at varying rates. So the harder you go, the more you use from your muscles. The less hard you go, the more you can use from other sources. But this is finite. You only have a certain amount of glycogen in your system. So every time you go above this line, your aerobic threshold, you're using up your glycogen reserves, and these don't come back very quickly. It takes maybe if you completely deplete your glycogen reserves, it takes 24 hours without using them again for you to get them back. Now, it's not entirely clear whether you can get these back when you're riding more easily. If you're riding below in this sort of zone here, you're not using much of your glycogen reserves. So if you're eating a lot of carbs, you may be able to recover at least some of your glycogen reserves. But that's into nutrition, and that's something that I've been researching recently, and hopefully I'll do another video on that specifically, and how to use carbohydrate consumption during ultra endurance cycling events. So if you fancy that, then subscribe, and if you like this, then please like this video. So what we're looking at is conflicting requirements, like like in all sport, if you could ride as fast as you can for 24 hours a day, then obviously that would be what you do, but you have to trade all these things off. So you know that if you stay in this training zone here, below your aerobic threshold, you can go for a very long time, and other factors like needing to go to sleep and stop to eat or go to the toilet or whatever, and your mental strength are maybe the things that get tired. You might have to stop because you're basically just too psychologically fatigued to continue, and you have to go to sleep. Whereas if you go above this aerobic threshold, then you're starting to use this finite store of glycogen reserves and carbohydrate as an energy source. Sorry, but in this first zone you're using primarily your fat. It's a fat, metabolizing fat as an energy source. And even though you might be really skinny, you've still got loads and loads of fat. You've got plenty of fat to last you for days. So don't worry about that. This is almost effectively infinite. This is quite finite. If you ride hard, if you ride at this level, the top end of that zone, for between 40 and 70 minutes, you'll have used up all your glycogen reserves, and you'll have to slow down until you can replenish them. So, but because it's better to ride hills a bit harder, it's probably worth trying to ride the hills a little bit into this zone, or at least at the top end of this this fat burning training zone. So that's basically the crux of it, really, is you've got to find out how far you can go into this training zone on hills, and then recover so that you can do it again. And I can't tell you that, but you can make an estimate of that using the conventional classical training zones, or there's now some research to say that you might be able to use heart rate variability to estimate where your aerobic threshold. Unfortunately, it's not easy to measure, but the actual classic training zones are a good guide. So if you're using like Coggan zones, the top of zone 2 you could assume is your aerobic threshold, and see how you go with that, and then practice. Practice riding hills and recovering, and see how long you can go. So do one day first on a representative sort of terrain, see how that goes, and then if that works you can try back-to-back days, or you can try going a little bit faster. You have to work it all out for yourself. Unfortunately, that is the way that training works. It's incredibly individual, and that's why people employ coaches to help them bring in some objectivity and some measures of some numbers into the game, and also use, I've made a lot of mistakes, I suppose, as a coach. I can use the mistakes that the athletes that I work with make, so I've got this sort of box of information that I can then pass on to people that work with me. And this isn't a sales pitch, it's just an observation. So that's it. You want to be riding a bit above your aerobic threshold on climbs during a long ultra endurance event, a bit below it on the flat, so that you can and eating plenty of carbohydrates so that you can recover your glycogen reserves that you can then use for the next hill. And you don't want to be going in this zone, because you'll use up all your glycogen reserve really fast, and also this anaerobic capacity as well. So there you go. I hope this makes sense, and I hope it's useful to you. And if you've got other topics that you want me to talk about, then please let me know. And as I say, I'll try and do a video on using nutrition for ultra endurance cycling events, which is quite complicated, which is why I'm trying to do some research on it. There's not really a lot of hard research, as you can imagine, on the best nutritional strategies, because it's very difficult to test. There aren't many people you can get to ride for several days and then have different nutritional protocols. But there are some numbers in the literature that hopefully I can pull out and make some comment, and that can open up some discussion, and then we might all learn something from that. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.